back to Do an Extra. I'm Kristen with D1 Ticker. I'm joined by Jaime Gordon, AVCA CEO. Thanks for being on today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kristen.
Okay, the industry is still buzzing about the incredible Final Four we just witnessed not too long ago. Obviously, the place to start for this conversation would be your perspective on how women's indoor can continue this rocket ship trajectory.
Yeah, I would almost maybe analogize the trajectory like an airplane taking off, because it's been steady, and I think that's one of the areas that we're really excited about right now, is that we're seeing continued growth. That we're not in a stock market, and we're getting some rebound from an incredible year that we had in 2023, and I've highlighted what happened at Nebraska with 92,000 watching a game in the football stadium. And so from that point, we've seen just continued growth, and we're seeing it in multiple areas, from television viewership. That continues to be strong. And what we see once you start to dive into the numbers, some significant growth in adults under 35, which is a pretty unique space to be in, as well as female viewers. We see in kind of across the board throughout the season about anywhere from 41 to 43% female viewership, which, again, anybody that kind of nerds out on TV viewership numbers, that's very unique in the sports space. So we're seeing that growth continue. From an attendance standpoint, our records just continue to get increase. We finished the season with a record at our national championship, just under 22,000 at the Yum Center in Louisville. But we also enjoyed, I believe, at the end of the season, about 44 Division I records being broken. And to give that comparison, the year before, there were 31 attendance records broken at the Division I level. So we're seeing a lot of that going. And I think another part that's exciting for me is that we're doing it on the back of the sport in general and the experience that they're having. We're not being carried by one particular personality. So we don't have the benefit of a Caitlin Clark effect type. And so I think that trajectory continues to be consistent, and we're excited about it.
I'm thinking from an advertising perspective, that target audience for advertising for women around that age, I mean, that's the spending market right there. I'm sure for you, from a CEO perspective, the sponsorships there couldn't be better.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're seeing so much more inventory being distributed on TV. So 2 years ago, we had never had a college volleyball match on network television. Last year, there were 2, and then this season that we just came off of, we had 8 network broadcasts. So again, that's Fox, ABC, NBC. And so I think we're seeing that interest and that investment, not just in the windows, but also in the production levels from Fox, Disney, NBC, CBS, because of the market that you're talking about. And so they're seeing that as, wow, without a whole lot of investment, there is some intrigue there. So yeah, you're spot on.
You were just with a lot of the members at your convention, got to talk, candidly with a few, I'm sure. When you think about the coaches, what are they most looking forward to this year? And what are some of the concerns and things that they're worried about?
Yeah, I think like anyone in college athletics right now, there is so much unknown that we're facing. We're all anxious to see what happens with the House settlement, and is that going to be approved? If that settlement is approved, what are the ramifications? As we start to transition into a space of revenue share, how does that apply, and how does that trickle down to volleyball? And what we're seeing in our landscape is that it's different, from institution to institution, conference to conference. So I think our coaches are trying to figure out, how do I navigate this space? It's a skill set that they haven't had to use before, so many of them haven't developed it. You have to start looking at things like a general manager a little bit more. So if you have a roster and you have some revenue, how are you distributing that? So there's, I think, a lot of unknowns. And then in full transparency, the impact of the transfer portal is taking its toll on our coaches. There is, when we look about what's uncertain down the road, there's a lot of uncertainty of what I have today. So, hey, we just finished up a great season, and then some of my top players have left, and I wasn't necessarily seeing that. Or, transferring is nothing new. It's happened for years and years. But as a coach, you usually have some, you've been working through with this with one of your athletes that, okay, yeah, I get it. Maybe this situation isn't right for you or whatever. But now those things are coming kind of from a blind spot. And so I think there's some emotional toll that our coaches are going through as well.
Let's talk about the club level. How have the changes that we're talking about in college athletics impacting the perception of opportunities in collegiate volleyball?
Yeah, and I think you're spot on when you talk about the perception, because at the club level and around families' dining room tables, what they see are headlines, and so some of those headlines that have come out of the settlement with the elimination of scholarship maximums, and now we're moving to roster caps, and so yes, a Division I institution had only been permitted to offer 12 scholarships, now can offer up 18, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are. And the other side of that is that an institution that maybe had 19 or 20 or 21 student athletes on their roster now have to reduce that. And so in certain spaces, there's maybe even a reduction in those opportunities. So again, there's still a lot of uncertainty there, but the headlines kind of promote that. And we actually see it on the men's volleyball side and beach volleyball as well, because those have much more or have been dealing with much more restrictive levels of scholarship maximums. So men's volleyball is only permitted an equivalency of 4.5 and beach 6. So when their rosters go to, limits go to 18 and 19 respectfully, at the youth level, they go, oh my gosh, look at how many more scholarships men's volleyball are going to have. No, that's not the case. And really, I get concerned about what the next 5 to 6 years can look like for broad-based sponsorship in college athletics. We may not see as many teams and sports being sponsored. I mean, that could have some adverse effects on men's volleyball and beach as well.
On the rules front, what elements of the game do you see maybe need to be reviewed to produce a better viewing or spectator experience?
Yeah, I talk about this with coaches, and they say, hey, our game is really good. We shouldn't mess with it. And I use the analogy, there is no sports league more successful than the NFL. And they are constantly changing their rules. They have to evolve. I think right now the sport of volleyball is really good from the time the ball is served to the whistle blows to end. But that time in between can use a little bit of tweaking in that pace of play of moving things along. So, for example, and these are my opinions, and as well, I think some of them have been framed by conversations with television production, but our timeouts are too long. We do a 90-second timeout, and if Kristen, my team is playing your team, and we get towards the end of the set, we each have two timeouts. So there has a tendency to be a lot of compression around those timeouts happening, and so we get these breaks in the rhythm of the game. So I think potentially reducing those as far down to 30 seconds is a good idea, and maybe reducing that to 1 per set, so that we can operate in maybe a little bit more of a reliable 2-hour slot from a broadcast standpoint. I think there's some discussions about a serve clock.
Mm.
How quickly are we going from serve to serve so that we maintain that pace? I think there is technology available to improve our replay system so that we can be more effective and more efficient. And again, just trying to reduce some of that downtime. Also, from showing the game, I'm a maybe it's a little bit of a pet peeve, but our up official, who's calls the game from an elevated point, usually has their back to the camera, and so we show one of the key players in the production of the game is the official, constantly showing their back, but it also impacts how the net play is able to be um, presented. And so I think there's some opportunity, there's some incredible athleticism and great things that are happening in that moment or that space. And we're putting somebody to create a barrier or an obstacle for it. So not super big things, but there's a lot of tweaking that I think we can do to just keep the rhythm of the game moving along.
Very similar. You talked about the serve clock, very similar to the pitch clock in softball, where they made some changes there. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to a major league game this year, and I was sitting in the stands. And to be honest, I wasn't invested in either of the teams. Was just there to watch the game. And all of a sudden, I looked up and I was like, "Oh my gosh! We're midway through the fifth inning," and it was great because it
Yeah.
moved, it didn't drag, and I think that's what consumers are looking for. It's really hard in today's life to commit a really big window of time. To consuming a sport. And if I have other options, I'm going to take advantage of that. And so we just need to make sure that our sport's evolving in that same way.
Outside of women's indoor, what are the key storylines for the overall sport of volleyball that you are looking forward to in 2025?
Yeah, we've got a lot happening. We currently have uh, three professional women's indoor leagues. Athletes Unlimited that is just finished up their fourth season, and then the PVF, which is going into their second season, and then the launch of League One. And then I kid you not, right before we got on, I got a press release of another league that is looking to launch in 26. So when we talk about people that identify that there is some value and some investment opportunity in our sport, we are definitely seeing that from the outside. And so when you do look at what are some of the key factors to happen for a sport to truly take some big time leaps, successful professional opportunities are important, especially domestically. Our top players have for decades played professionally, but they're doing it overseas in Italy and Turkey and in Japan. So having the ability to do that domestically and then kind of continue to grow our sport within our own fan base and our own borders, I think is a huge, huge opportunity for us.
The best is truly yet to come. Thank you so much for your time, Jamie.
Thanks, Kristen.